First off, I want to say thanks to all of you. Before I was a 501st member and everything else, I was a type 1 diabetic. My story goes back about 26 years. I was 15 years old and was diagnosed when I was a sophomore in high school. And there's nothing worse than trying to figure out why I lost 25 pounds between Christmas and spring break, and why I couldn't see anymore because my eyesight was going bad, and I slept 20 hours a day during spring break and everything else. And so that was my introduction into type 1 diabetes, and it's much different today. We've been able to go through the process with my oldest son, who was actually diagnosed about a year ago, and he actually just started his insulin pump last week. And so he and I have that special bond that we get to go and do our pumps together, and we get to figure out boluses at the same time. So, but when Jeff asked me to talk, he wanted me to kind of communicate about my involvement with JDRF and the 501st and how that all tied together. And the type 1 stuff obviously came first, and I've been involved with JDRF for actually about 14 years. And I've been doing the walks for that long. And when I joined the 501st Legion back in 2006, it was one of those things where I thought it would be kind of cool to do something different. And so my wife and I came up with the idea that I was going to be defined as the type 1 stormtrooper. So, and my goal of that was always to interact with the kids, show them that it wasn't the end of the world. And so on all of my costumes, if I've got it someplace on the outside, I will actually stick my insulin pump in there. And so then when I'm talking to the kids and hey, who are you walking for? So I ask that question a lot, and they'll say, oh, we're walking for Ellie, or we're walking for Bob or Larry or whoever. Well, then I make a point to go up to them and I'll show them that. I go, hey, I have type 1 diabetes as well, and so I can make that connection there. And so a few years ago when JDRF decided that they were going to do the hats, that we could identify the people that are out walking during the day of the event, I said, I want that. I said, my group, we want to do that. And so every year when you go to the JDRF Walk in Denver, Colorado, the 501st is responsible for handing out those hats to all of those people that are type 1 diabetics. And that's a neat thing for us because then we get to identify with that. Including my son, we actually have 5 members who have type 1 diabetes. So this hits close to home for us. In a number of ways. So we've been doing the walk a number of years, and then for a number of years, and then about 5 years ago, James Buckles, who was the previous executive director for JDRF, approached me and said, hey, I love what you guys do with the walk. It's great. It's fantastic. Have you ever thought about stepping it up a little bit? And I said, well, what are you thinking? And he goes, well, what about the gala? And I thought, okay, what about it? He goes, well, what if we did a Star Wars event at the gala? He goes, the people love you guys and everything else. And I will be honest, I'm not a hoity-toity fancy type of person. And my wife and I used to volunteer for the gala every year, and we would help set up and do those things. And we realized that wasn't the event for us. The day that we were helping setting up for the event, my wife and I are down on our knees and we're setting stuff up in the auction. And this lady, and I'm sure she had the best of intentions, but she comes walking by and she goes, girl, you really need a pedicure. And walked on, and my wife and I just kind of looked at each other and went, did she really just say that? And it was, I mean, like I said, I'm sure she meant it in the best intentions possible, but it was just like, this isn't our crowd. We are not the, uber elite. We are not the high, I can't write a $5,000 check to donate to JDRF every year. I can't do that. I have a wife that stays at home, I have 2 kids, I just can't afford to do that. So the walk was a better fit for us. And so when James came and approached me, I was a little bit hesitant. Well, what do you think? And he goes, well, what if we were to partner with a bowling alley or a laser tag facility, and what if we did it as a Star Wars birthday party? And we sold the event in the live auction, and we got you guys up on stage, and we made a big presentation about it, and we auctioned it off. What would you think? And I thought, okay, we'll give it a shot. We'll see what happens. And I thought I was going to cry the first time that we did that, and we raised $4,000 at the live auction for JDRF on the first night that we did that. And I was just blown away. I couldn't believe that someone would be willing to pay $2,000 for us to show up and entertain them at a laser quest. And we sold 2 that night, so that's how we made that money. So he said, it's a great thing, let's keep doing that. And so we've done that for the last 4 years, and then this year we decided to step it up even further. And through my connection in the 501st Legion, I know a gentleman by the name of Steve Sansweet, and if anybody's a big Star Wars aficionado, does anybody know that name? Okay, nobody does. That's okay. Steve actually used to work for Lucasfilm, and he actually owns the world's largest collection of Star Wars memorabilia anywhere. And so several years ago, he actually got George Lucas to agree to let him open up a place called Rancho Obi-Wan. And it is an actual nonprofit 501c museum in Petaluma, California, that is dedicated to Star Wars memorabilia. And so they do school tours and they do all these things. And so I thought, well, what if I call Steve and see if they'd be willing to donate a tour? And he was, and they actually said they'd donate 2 of them. So they donated some memberships and everything else. Well, then we were all excited about how this was going to work out, but the thing I didn't know about is transportation. How do we get people there? How do we make this an event? And so we talked with the folks at the JDRF office, and we can do travel vouchers, and we can do this and do that. And I thought that would be great. Okay, we'll make that work, and as long as we raise a certain amount of money, we're covered. If we do a $1,000 travel voucher and $500 in hotel, as long as we raise more than $1,500, then we're golden. Well, and this is where my tie-in with Jeff comes into play. And I love Jeff, by the way, and I'm a little bummed he's not here to hear this, because I think he doesn't quite understand how much it meant to me. But the day of the event, we walk up, and as we're walking onto the stage, we're being presented where here we're going to do this live auction event. I'm walking up and I'm looking at the little description on the screen, and it says private jet for 8 to San Francisco included in this auction, and I'm speechless. Thankfully I have a helmet on so nobody can see my expression or anything else. So we're standing up on stage and I'm thinking to myself, where in the world did this come from? So we start the bidding. And people start going on and on and on. All of a sudden, we're at $2,000 like that. And we keep going and keep going. And we sold that event for $8,000. And I was beside myself. So then after the event, was all excited and everything else. And I saw Jeff and I said, did you do that? And he goes, yeah. Mr. Wagner's really good about donating his plane every once in a while. And I called him up and he said, I've got the event for you to donate your plane for. Would you be willing to do it? And Mr. Wagner said, Jeff, for you and for this and for JDRF, absolutely. And so Jeff Gartz is responsible for making that a very big deal and for getting us the donation we did. But we raised $8,000 last night. To date, just for the gala, the 501st has helped raise over $25,000 for JDRF locally in doing those events. So, what's that?
Wagner Equipment.
Yeah, Wagner Equipment. So that's been a big thing for us, and we do these walks all over the nation. It's funny because I always see the different folks in different parts of the country that are doing these events and do the walks. So we have troopers at walks in probably 15 different states whenever these happen, and we show up and we do the event. And for me, it's a big deal because it's able to tie the 2 things that are most important for me outside of my God and my family, which is Star Wars and JDRF. Those are kind of big deals for me. They're a lot of fun, and I enjoy suiting up in it, but it was a great way for me to tie those things together. And for my family, we enjoy it, and hopefully the kids enjoy it. Every year I get told, you guys are coming back next year, you guys are going to be a booth, and you guys are going to do the walk, and so it seems to be something that the folks who attend the walk, it's memorable for them and excited about, and so that's kind of my quick and dirty little story, if you will. I do a sand trooper, so it's kind of nice, so I get dirty every once in a while. But we've had photos at JDRF in the Rocky Mountain News, and I've got this newspaper clipping at home where I've got my son, who when he was about 6 is in this little tiny Boba Fett costume with a stormtrooper and Darth Vader, and they were doing an article about JDRF and the walk and why we were there, and they talked to me about it a little bit and asked me where my connection was, and so I was able to share that connection with type 1 diabetes and JDRF at that time, and it was a big deal. And I'm just thankful that I've been able to be a part of JDRF in this capacity. I just cycled off the board, spent 6 years as a board member with JDRF, and so I'm kind of trying to figure out where this is coming from, and I think this is Jeff's attempt to say, I've got this other club that's still connected to type 1 diabetes that you might want to be a part of. And so,
and some of your other troopers.
And everything else. So I think there's an ulterior motive there for that, which I don't blame Jeff at all, and he's very good at that. There is. And so, but that's kind of my story, and that's what I know. I would love to share with you guys anything else. If you've got any questions about the 501st, about JDRF, about me, anything in between. Yes, ma'am.
Tell me what the 501st is.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I kind of didn't do a very good job of that tonight. Okay. Well, the 501st Legion is an international Star Wars costuming group. We are one of 3 recognized costuming groups by Lucasfilm, and what that means is that we get to do everything that we do, and Lucasfilm leaves us alone. So we make these costumes on our own, we sell them between our members, we put them together. I own 6 different costumes. At one point in time I owned 9. I built them all myself and created them and made them look the way they do, and my wife owns 2 of them. So she's a member and she got involved because of me, but we actually, at this point in time, we actually have members on every continent on the planet. We actually have a member down in Antarctica that he had this very small, he works for a research company, and he had this very small amount of space that he could take with him. And he said, I'm taking my armor, because I'm going to get a picture of me in Antarctica in armor. So we can say we're in all, so we have a little over 6,000 members worldwide, and we've been in existence since 1997. And the whole thing started, and it has a charity tie-in, and so there's a big deal to this, which is kind of cool, is that in 97, there was a guy by the name of Albin Johnson in South Carolina, and they were getting ready to re-release the movies. They did the whole Star Wars special edition. It was the 20th anniversary of A New Hope. And so he and a couple buddies thought it'd be really cool if they dressed up as a stormtrooper and went to the movie. And they did, and people just went nuts. They thought it was the coolest thing ever and couldn't believe it. Well, if you remember in the mid to late 90s, there was this thing called the internet that was really starting to catch fire, and people were using it a lot. Well, yeah, exactly. Well, then people started posting pictures of these events that they were doing and talking in chat rooms, and hey, I dress up as a stormtrooper, and all of a sudden, well, hey, I do too, and hey, I do too. And so Albin realized that there was a collective group of people that had this interest and had this desire, and it would be a cool thing to tap into together. And so in 1997, he founded the 501st Legion, and he wanted something that sounded very militaristic, but it fit within, but it wasn't really stepping on anything that Lucas had already done, because that's a big no-no, and everything else. And so over the years, it just kind of grew and grew and grew. And so originally there were, it's kind of funny because there were 13 original garrisons, so it's kind of like the 13 colonies and everything else. And so Colorado was actually a part of one of those first 13, and we actually had members in Utah, Arizona, Wyoming, New Mexico, and Colorado, and that made up the Mountain Garrison, which is the group that I'm a part of today. And it went from there to just explode. Well, about 3 or 4 years after Albin joined, he had a daughter by the name of Katie. And Katie actually was diagnosed with, and I wish I could remember the type of cancer, but she was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And I apologize that I can't remember which one. I should know this off the cuff, but she told her dad at one point in time, she said, you know, it'd be really cool if I had a pink R2 droid to watch over me when I was sick. So it's kind of the R2-D2 thing. So this story got out, and we also have this group that are the R2 builders. So all of these droids that you see run around at these conventions and everything else, guys make those on their own. I mean, all of the stuff that you see is all handmade, homemade. You know, these really crafty people in their garages that make these forms, and they do vacuum forming and resin casting and everything else. Well, they made this pink droid, and it was kind of a gift to Albin, and the droid's name was R2KT. And the whole theme was, it was the Imperial droid, the pink Imperial droid with a heart of gold. And so Katie got to see the droid and spent the last 6 months of her life with R2KT right next to her. And so when they went to the hospital, when they had an event where they actually got her wish was granted by Make-A-Wish Foundation, and so then that created the tie-in to Make-A-Wish. And so that's one of the primary charities that the 501st works with. And so that developed, and so there's this whole big thing that we have R2KT that's a part of the 501st. Hasbro in 2007 actually honored the 501st Legion, and Albin and Katie, they actually made an action figure of R2KT. And so there was an action figure out there, and every once in a while you see them on eBay or whatever, but there's actually a pink droid that was R2KT. But we have, our group is basically founded on 3 principles. You have to love Star Wars. You have to be over the age of 18, and you have to have a movie quality costume. And so that third one is the one that becomes more difficult because of the way our agreement with Lucasfilm is we can't just open up a Stormtrooper store and put it on the internet and let everybody come and buy. There's this little thing that they like to protect called their intellectual property and licensing. And so there aren't any stores, and a lot of this stuff is done in people's garages, and they work on them on the weekends, and they just build these kits and put them together and dress up, and it looks cool and everything else. And we are 100% a not-for-profit, not-for-hire group. Everything we do is volunteer-based. So when we do an event like JDRF, all of those proceeds go to JDRF. We're actually doing a birthday party this coming Saturday for one of the Type 1 families that saw us at the walk, and we're going to go do an appearance with them at their 4-year-old's birthday party for 15 minutes, and she's going to make a donation to JDRF in the name of the 501st. And so that's where our involvement and engagement comes in. In 2012, we were actually directly involved with either financial or in-kind donations of $118 million worldwide. So we have kind of a big reach, and we have a good opportunity to be involved with a lot of things from a charity perspective, and that's kind of our focus. So,
what's your favorite costume that you wear?
You know, right now, I have one. It's in. Nobody will know what this is, but that's okay. It's an animated clone trooper, and it's from the animated series that they did. They did 5 seasons of an animated cartoon series called The Clone Wars, and they did those. They did video games and everything else. And I actually have a clone trooper, and his name is Sergeant Boomer. And the reason why it's cool for me is because I was the very first one in the world to have that costume. So I have a title that's designated first in the Legion of that costume. So whenever, and there's 3 of us now in the Legion, but whenever everybody looks and says, well, that's a cool costume, I can always say I was the very first one that did that one. So it's a lot of fun, and it's got these belt boxes on the side, and I actually keep my insulin pump on the one side. So that's another reason why I like it. So I can kind of open that up and show them that, you know, I have Type 1. So.
Do you guys have like a Facebook where we can see pictures?
We do. Our Facebook, it's the Mountain Garrison, and then we have
the
Mountain Garrison. Yeah. And I actually brought some trading cards. I brought mine and my wife's trading card in case anybody wants those, but we've got our website on the back of there. And so we have a website. It's primarily forums that we communicate with one another, but we also have a gallery section, and we've got a lot of events and stuff like that. We've got some statistics about how to contact us and what we do and everything else. So,
how many members in the Mountain Garrison?
We have almost 100 members. Right now, because of our growth, the Mountain Garrison covers Colorado and Wyoming. So we actually have, I think now we have 7 members in Wyoming, and then we have right at 90 members within the state of Colorado. So, and we are broken up into squads. Again, it's very militaristic in environment. So we have the Mountain Garrison, and then we have 3 squads. We have the Snowy Range Squad, which is north of Denver and all of Wyoming. And then we have the Mile High Squad, which is the squad I belong to, which is the Denver metro area. And then we have the Pikes Peak Squad, which is southern Colorado, Colorado Springs, Pueblo, and they're a very active group. We normally have anywhere from 65 to 70 events a year that we actually get invited to and we participate in. So we can be very busy. We have events almost every weekend in some capacity, sometimes 2 or 3. So.
You go to Comic Con?
Oh yes. We have a very big presence at Starfest, Denver Comic Con, and we've done panels. Okay.
Ask you to join us.
Well, thank you very much. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. Oh, I like that. I'm getting the paperwork. That's fantastic. I like that.
Well, I'm wondering how hot the costumes really are.
How hot the costumes really get. They're warm. If you ever see any of us that stands there and goes like this, the reason why is because it creates a little bit of airflow, and if there's any kind of breeze, it helps cool us off. But if you have time for a moment, I've got a story to tell you. I have been lucky enough to participate for 2 years, and it was a few years ago, but in Star Wars Weekends, which is actually put on at Disney World. So every year, the last 2 weekends in May and the first 2 weekends in June, Disney turns their Hollywood studios into a Star Wars extravaganza. So Friday, Saturday, and Sunday is what they call Star Wars Weekends. They have special guests, they do all sorts of stuff, but they have this big giant parade that goes through Hollywood studios. The 501st Legion is the only group in the world that has ever been allowed to march on Disney property with a helmet on with their face covered. Disney is very, very careful about that. You you want to walk into the park and you got a helmet on that covers your face, you got to take it off. So we have some very unique opportunities there. Well, the group in Florida is kind of the point for that whole thing. And so the first year that I went down to do it, we had this guy from the Florida Garrison making this big speech about, it's really hot down here and you guys aren't used to it, you need to be prepared, and just, if you can't handle it, it's okay. So we're all going, whatever, we've done this before, we're fine. So we do the parade, and I remember as we're leaving and going into the back lot, there's this guy next to me in this clone costume, and I'm walking and I'm watching him and he's doing this. And there's another guy that's standing on the other side of him that was an EMT, and he literally goes, hold this, and we start peeling all of the plastic and all the armor off of this guy, and he literally passed out from heat exhaustion right there. And so we got him into a cool area, got him cooled down, and he was fine. Well, then the next day, we had a guy who dressed up as a Tusken Raider, and so if anybody knows Star Wars, they're the guys in the brown cloth that are wrapped from head to toe, and it's really hot. Well, this guy makes it all the way back to our changing area, and he literally passes out from heat exhaustion in the bushes behind Disney. Well, on Sunday, we had someone, and this one wasn't their fault, but we had someone with epilepsy that actually had a seizure in the Disney parking lot. Well, the reason that it's interesting is because all three of those people were all from Florida. And so we thought it was kind of ironic that they're making such a big deal about all you out-of-towners, be prepared. And they took that approach, so it was very interesting. But it definitely is it's a concern. A lot of times when we do events like the walk and things like that, we will ask for an enclosed area so that we can go in the back and take our helmets off and do things like that. And we usually stay very hydrated. I've actually dressed up in my snowtrooper costume in Florida for the last 2 Star Wars conventions, so I'm a glutton for punishment. So. It does get warm in there. But,
this is a great talk. You do more talks like this with other groups?
no, I don't. I maybe should.
Do we have an interest in a possible speaker at a
Sure.
meeting?
Sure. Love to have you.
He is going to be the governor of the Optimist for Colorado and Wyoming next year, and there's probably 1,700 members